A night that started with the birthday celebration ended in tragedy when a fire erupted in the early hours at the Freeman home. Among the rubble, 2 adults were found, both with a gunshot wound to the head. However, 2 teenage girls, Ashley Freeman and her best friend Laura Bible, were missing. Finally, after more than 20 years, some questions have been answered, while others still remain. This is episode 29, the Ashley Freeman and Laura Bible story. Hi, Megan.
Hi, Amy.
How are you?
I'm great. I'm always happy when we're recording.
I'm always happy to be with you, Megan.
Me too.
Today's episode is a little bit different than usual. As always, we're going to start off talking about the case, but rather than spend a lot of time dissecting it, at the conclusion, we are going to talk with Jax Miller.
I know. I've been very
So
excited about
excited.
this.
Yeah, so Jax Miller is the author of Hell in the Heartland, Murder, Meth, and the Case of the 2 Missing Girls. She's also one of the producers on the HLN doc on this case. She is awesome.
I haven't seen the HLN doc yet. I was holding out a little bit on that one, but I did read the book.
I was just going to ask you, I could guess what you thought of it, but
I could, but we can talk about it later. So this
Okay.
one will also be a little different because I have a little more knowledge than
Mhm.
normal about your case,
Yeah.
but I can talk about this forever.
excellent. Yeah, so the book was excellent, and as you'll learn shortly, Jax not only wrote the book, she spent several years investigating this case, and she also has grown quite close to some of those involved. But more on that later.
Okay.
The Freeman family lived in a small rural town of Welch, Oklahoma. That's in northern Oklahoma. It's only, I believe, 8 miles from the Kansas border.
Right.
They lived in a trailer on a remote property, very rural area.
When you say the family, you mean the Freeman family, right?
Correct. Yep. The Freeman family, consisted of 16-year-old Ashley, her mother Kathy, and her father Danny. The family had recently lost their son Shane. Shane was just a teenager when he was involved in a police shooting. I'm going to give you a very brief summary on what happened with Shane because it might be a little relevant. Shane had run away from home and he told authorities that he was abused by his father Danny. Danny was subsequently charged with assault. This was back in January of 1999. It turns out Shane had stolen a vehicle and a gun, and this all resulted in an altercation with an officer, which ended in Shane pulling a gun and a deputy firing and killing Shane almost instantly. There was a big investigation, and the sheriff's department concluded that the shooting was justified. However, the family did not believe that the shooting was in fact justified. It was hard for them to believe. They did not think that it was self-defense, as the sheriff's department claimed. They said it was a cold-blooded murder.
Didn't they also file a lawsuit?
Yeah, well, they were in the middle of filing a wrongful death lawsuit.
Right. And that's why this is going to come into play later, correct?
Exactly.
Okay.
The family was very vocal, and there was a big rift between the police and the Freeman family. Lots of tension going on. And as I mentioned, this becomes possibly a part of this case.
Yes.
So Ashley Freeman's best friend was Laura Bible. The 2 girls met in kindergarten, and they were instant friends, just like us.
I was
Megan.
going to say that.
They were inseparable, both in school and out of school. In 1995, Ashley's family moved about 20 minutes away, but their friendship remained very strong. Laura was quite close to her parents, Lorene and Jay, and came from a very tight-knit family. On December 29th, 1999, Laura and Ashley spent the evening together celebrating Ashley's 16th birthday. That day, they had gone shopping with Kathy, Ashley's mom. They had returned home and they had birthday cake with her parents and her boyfriend, Jeremy. After the festivities, Jeremy left about 9:30 p.m. and he says everything appeared to be quite normal. And Laura stayed the night. Her parents had given her permission to stay the night, as they often did.
I know, but I read. Did you read this part already? That she had stayed the night before, and she was supposed to go home, and then she asked for permission to stay another night. So this was like an additional.
Yes, and since it was Ashley's birthday, I remember Laura's mom said you have a dentist appointment early the next day. You have to come home. But
I sort of just had a little pit in my stomach when I read that part.
I know. And the way the parents, I don't know if you've seen the parents talk about this, but the way they explain it, it was, it's so heartbreaking. Around 5:30 a.m. the next morning, the police received a call stating that the Freeman's trailer was engulfed in flames. Law enforcement showed up on the scene, and they were quick to determine that the fire had been intentionally started. Inside the home, the charred remains of Kathy, who was 38 at the time, was discovered, and she was found lying on the floor of their bedroom. And an autopsy would soon reveal that she had been shot in the head, and in fact, she was shot prior to the fire being started. At this point, that was the only body that was found.
Okay.
So initially, no other remains were located. Law enforcement at this time started to believe that Ashley's father, Danny Freeman, had likely killed his wife and fled with both girls. Now, this goes back to what was going on with the police. The police had a theory that Danny was so angry about what had happened with his son, just months prior, that he killed his wife and was taking the girls as a way to hold them hostage. It didn't make much sense, but no one knew what to think at this time.
It didn't make much sense also, but I did read in the book that Danny also could be like the nicest guy, but was also volatile and had a bad temper. So I could maybe see if he's missing why they're going to that assumption.
And he has a long history of drug abuse.
Right.
That doesn't mean necessarily that he would do such a thing, but he has tendencies to be violent when he's under the influence.
And you have to make certain assumptions when you're on a crime scene quickly when they're missing children.
Exactly. However, this theory didn't last long. Number one, Danny and Kathy's cars were both there.
Oh.
Laura's car was also in the driveway, actually with the keys in the ignition. And where they lived in a rural area, it's not that you could just get away on foot. So with the cars all being there, it was a little questionable. Either way, the local police were quick to call in the state police, the OSBI, which is the Oklahoma State Bureau of Investigation. You know why they did this, Megan?
Why?
The local police did this because of the history with the family.
Oh, I remember that.
Yes.
Now.
So
okay. Yes.
Remember, so they called it a conflict of interest, and I actually don't fault them for this. I think this was a smart move because they were in the middle of a wrongful death lawsuit with the family. And like I said, almost a year prior, they had killed the Freeman's son.
Totally the right move.
Definitely the right move. The problem is that people had a big issue with this because it took a little longer to start properly investigating the scene, because you have the local police who aren't doing much while they're waiting for the state police to be called in. And some people say, they lost some time here.
They probably did lose time. I'm sure the local police, though, I would think at a minimum, they put out some type of, I don't think Amber Alert was a thing, though. They probably tried to put out some type of alert just for the girls. Correct. Or him. They probably did some minimal work.
They did. But as we'll see, there's some evidence that ended up being found that could have led them to Laura and Ashley when they were still alive.
Right. Okay.
Laura's parents, Lorene and Jay, were obviously very unhappy with the police's response. Their daughter was missing. So they decided to go to the scene themselves, hoping to find any additional clues that law enforcement may have missed. And Megan, get ready for this. But while walking around the extensive rubble, they discovered some evidence. They discovered, you remember?
I do.
They discovered another body in the rubble, and they quickly were able to determine that it was Danny. Danny had also been shot in the head, execution style. He had a broken collarbone, which suggests that there may have been a struggle. His body was found not far from Kathy's. No gun was found nearby. So quickly people say, oh, murder-suicide, because again, everyone wants to look at Danny as the suspect here. However, there was no gun found near the body, quickly shooting down that theory.
So Lorene and her husband found Danny's body.
And not only did they find it, they said it was covered by debris, and there were actually boot prints visible on his body.
So that means that officers had stepped over his body.
Absolutely.
Okay, that's a serious problem.
It's a serious problem. So you have both the local police and the state police that are on the scene, and somehow they miss this. At this point, Lorene and Jay are wondering, well, what else could they have missed? And they really jumped into action, and they just started investigating themselves. They got 500 volunteers. They were going through the rubble bit by bit, trying to find any pieces of evidence.
Exactly what I'd do if it was my daughter.
Absolutely. There were absolutely no signs of the missing girls. As I mentioned, the police had to change their initial theory, though, right? Couldn't it be that Danny had kidnapped the girls? It couldn't be a murder-suicide. So now they're thinking maybe it was a drug deal gone bad. People around town knew that Danny was heavily involved in drugs. They really didn't think it could be a random attack. And as we see often, this kind of crime very rarely is a random attack.
I wouldn't have thought random attack either. Was Danny involved in, I know that he used marijuana, but he was also involved in meth, correct?
We don't know.
We're not
There's
sure.
definitely
Okay.
reports that he was. And
Okay.
at the very least, he hung around with a lot of people who ran in those circles.
Okay.
So the police are thinking, could it have been the girls? Perhaps. Remember how I said that Danny had abused Shane? Well, Ashley had a hard time with the death of her brother, and some say that she may have been upset about her brother's death, and maybe the father was also abusing Ashley. Maybe Kathy stepped in to protect his daughter, and then maybe the girls killed Danny and they fled.
Okay.
Sounds like a probable theory, except the cars were there and the girls' pocketbooks were still in the home with all of their belongings. But I do want to mention one thing that is curious that was missing. Apparently, Ashley had stored $4,000 in cash in the freezer. She was a hard worker and she was saving up for a car. So other family members told the police about this, and that money was actually gone. So this theory that the girls did it and fled, no evidence of this, highly unlikely. Some people suggest that maybe she offered the perpetrators this money as a way to have them leave. So
Right.
that's possible. That's why the money is missing. But
Okay.
there's no confirmation that that money was in fact there anyway.
I don't remember that. That's interesting. Okay.
As usually happens with these types of cases, lots of tips came in, but they were all dead end. Several people called in sightings of Danny and the girls. However, we know Danny was dead, so that can't be possible.
Right.
The Freemans and many others believed that the local sheriff's department was responsible. There was this huge conspiracy theory. Do you remember hearing about that?
I do, yes.
Apparently, Danny had told his brother soon before the fire that if anything had happened to him, look at the sheriff's department. There was a lot of intimidation and harassment going on between Danny and the sheriff's department, again, because of what had happened with their son, Shane.
Right.
The family, as we mentioned, was in the process of filing a wrongful death suit. And I did read somewhere that they only had 1 week until that expired because it's supposed to be within a year.
I read that too. And that is, I mean, unfortunately, that's just very coincidental.
And that happens sometimes.
Of course.
Yeah.
I mean, that hence a coincidence, but still, I mean, I understand why there was some scrutiny on this.
I also do. This theory was ruled out pretty quickly by the state police. It seemed like a stretch, really, I think, to say that the police would obliterate a whole family over a wrongful death lawsuit.
I mean, if it was just Danny that was gone, to be honest, or just the parents, I wouldn't necessarily say that means, the police did it, but it would hold a little bit more water. So I think you're right. It's a real stretch.
Yeah. At this time, there was also a local inmate who came forward and said he had seen Laura and Ashley at a New Year's Eve party, and they were drugged, raped, and tortured. The police searched the home that he alleged that this happened at, and they found absolutely nothing. I do want to point out that many other people came forward with this party, that they saw the girls at this New Year's Eve party.
I remember reading this.
Yeah, it's really awful. The community really band together for the searches of the girls. In January of 2000, there was a large memorial service held for Danny and Kathy. The investigation continued on. Again, no real leads, zero signs of the girls. There was a $15,000 reward that was offered. Every time they offered a reward, again, lots of tips would come in, but they were all dead ends. The police started looking at neighboring states and at other crimes. I don't know if you recall hearing about this, but 2 death row inmates confessed to these crimes at 2 different times.
No.
Do you know who Tommy Lynn Sells is?
Oh, that sounds familiar. It really does. I do, but I
Yes.
don't.
No. So Tommy Lynn Sells committed a crime that was very similar and very close the day after the fire. Now, when Tommy Lynn Sells confessed to the crime, he was on death row, and in fact, he was executed back in 2014. He, of course, confessed, and we'll talk about in a minute why individuals on death row often confess to crimes they did not commit.
Right.
After he was ruled out, then we see John Paul Chapman. And you know John Paul Chapman, what's his real name?
Jeremy Jones.
Yep. He was also in the area and seemed to know things about the case, such as the type of gun used and the accelerant used. And that information was not released to the public. So the police started thinking maybe he actually did know something. But after jumping through all the hoops like they usually do, take me to the scene, took him to the scene, they found nothing. He ends up recanting. So Megan, if you were on death row, why would you confess to crimes that you did not commit?
To extend my stay on death row.
Exactly. You want to extend your stay because at the end of your stay is death, right?
Right.
you get more
More
privileges.
cases, more privileges, more time in the courts. It just extends your time.
Exactly. And also, a lot of people on death row, they just want to play the system. They are bored.
I was just going to say that also. Don't discount the fact that there's boredom and, like, there's a tension that comes with that. So there's actually a multitude of reasons.
Yeah. And also, you want to leave your cell. You
Yeah.
get to go with the police. I'll show you where the body is. Let's
Yeah.
take a ride to a rural area. That kills a whole day that you could have been on, death row staring at the wall.
No pun intended.
Oh, I know. I don't know if you know this, but Tommy Lynn Sells confessed to over 70 murders while he was on death row.
So I teach serial killers, and I can tell you that a lot of serial killers over confess by a lot, and it's for those reasons.
Yep.
So, I guess that doesn't surprise me.
It could also be, Megan, as you know, in prison, you get visitation, you get more time on the kiosk, you get a different meal. When you're in a desperate situation like that, you will do anything. You have nothing to lose.
Nothing to lose.
Nope. Either way, we're going, we have all of these leads and everything ends up a dead end. In 2010, the OSBI released details about 2 vehicles that had been seen around the crime scene. Again, nothing came out of this. It just pissed the public off because they wanted to know, why didn't we hear this sooner?
Right.
So my point is that there were little things here and there happening, but for the most part, the case went pretty cold. So let's fast forward until 2018 when the case finally started moving again. And as we often see, some say it was thanks to the family and friends of the girls who would not give up on their search.
I read about Lorene, and I mean, she seemed to be the driving force behind this.
Absolutely. She still is. And I definitely want to talk to Jax about her because from what I understand, they have quite a strong relationship now.
That's great.
Because of the family not giving up on the search and some new people taking a look at some old evidence, the police were able to identify 3 perpetrators. 2 of 3 have since died, Phil Welch and David Pennington. The third, Ronnie Busick, is still alive. Who is this Ronnie Busick? Well, Ronnie's not that great of a character. He had been in and out of prison on drug-related convictions for nearly 40 years.
Yeah, I remember reading about him. Okay, yeah. And he's the only one, right? He's been apprehended at this time.
He was, in fact, incarcerated at the time he was arrested in relation to the girl's death.
Right. He's a career criminal.
Oh, absolutely. And since he was the only one alive of the 3 suspected perpetrators, he was being charged with 4 counts of first-degree murder, 2 counts of kidnapping, and arson. Details of the girls' horrific final days finally emerged. The 3 men, Phil Welch was considered the ringleader. They went to the trailer to settle a drug debt, and when things didn't go as planned, they killed Kathy and Danny. I heard that the girls were able to escape the trailer and hide out in the fields, but unfortunately, the perpetrators did find them, and from what some informants said, they just wanted to have a little fun with the girls.
Ugh.
The girls were kept alive for an unknown number of days. Some reports say 1 to 2 weeks. An ex-girlfriend of Welch told police that he had decorated his trailer with Ashley and Laura's missing person posters, but she didn't think to call the police. Also, Welch had Polaroids that showed Ashley and Laura bound and gagged on his bed.
This was the key piece of evidence, right? He showed the Polaroids to a few people.
They end up having at least a dozen witnesses who came forward to say that they saw these photos. And they say that the men kept these photographs as trophies to brag about their crimes and to use it to threaten other witnesses to keep them silent.
I also read that Phil Welch was one of the most sadistic human beings. What I read about him was probably more awful than anyone I've studied before.
Absolutely. It turns out many people knew about what was going on, but they were scared to death of Phil and his crew. Another witness told authorities that the girls were held for days at Phil's trailer. They were raped violently. They had parties that other people would abuse the girls, and then eventually they were strangled to death. And the police believe that their bodies were then thrown in a pit, which means there's all these mine shafts in the area. And several people have come forward saying that they do believe that that's where the bodies were done. So at this point, the focus is really on recovering the body of these 2 victims.
I read that that's always been Lorene's focus. So even when these perpetrators were identified and apprehended, she said, I want my daughter's remains.
Yep. As we often see, Megan, closure for victims it usually doesn't occur when someone is finally apprehended and charged for the crime.
Absolutely.
She wants to have a proper burial for her daughter.
Right.
And they felt like they finally might have had a chance when in July of 2020, very recently, Busick took a plea. Now, he was almost 70 years old at this time, or he is almost 70 years old at this time. He took a plea deal to a lesser charge, 1 count of accessory to murder in the first degree, in exchange for his commitment to help investigators find the teen's remains. At first, I'm looking at this thinking, this isn't a strong enough deal, because his deal was that he would serve 15 years in prison if the remains are not found, and only 5 if they could find the remains before August 31st. So I think it's really interesting that the investigators put a time on this. They said, if you don't get us these girls' bodies by August 31st, then the deal is over.
Because I don't think they want him to dilly-dally them around for a long time.
Exactly. And the age he is, I think people also know he's in very bad health.
I saw that. He's in really poor health. I think, at this point,
it's a death sentence.
They want him punished, but she wants her the remains.
Exactly. And that's exactly what Lorene would say. Yeah, of course I want him to be punished, but he's been in and out of jail the last 40 years anyway. So he's kind of been being punished in some sense.
Right.
At this point, she just wants her girl back. And the day that we record this is just a couple of days after August 31st. So what happened? So I was like glued to my computer, because August 31st was the deadline. If you don't give us the location of these girls' bodies, you're getting the higher end of that deal.
Oh my gosh, and that's a couple days ago.
2 days ago. So on August 31st, 2020, Ronnie Busick was sentenced to 10 years in prison. They also gave him credit for the 2 years that he has been in jail. So he has 10 years in, so really 8 years in, and then 5 years of probation. He told the police several places to search, but in fact, nothing showed up.
Oh.
And I'm not sure that it's because he's leading them to the wrong place. I think it's possible that the remains are just hard to find at this point.
Hard to find. It may have been that Phil Welch, was more of the leader, and it could have been even that the other accomplice helped dispose, or it could be because of years of substance abuse he can't remember.
Not only that, he also suffered a gunshot wound to the head.
I mean,
So-
I doubt, he's taken a plea. He's admitted his guilt. I doubt he's actually stringing them along at this point.
I agree.
Sure.
I don't think he's purposely not telling them where the bodies is. I think he did the best he could. But either way, he's only going to be in prison another 8 years. But again, even though he's only 68 or 69, he's an old 68 or 69, decades of drug abuse, a gunshot wound to the head. He's not in good health here.
They'll go back to him again too and try to, I would imagine they're going to go back a couple times and try to even make another plea. And, what can you remember?
Yeah.
I can't imagine that they'll give up.
I don't think they will. So I feel for this family. They still don't have that closure. I really look forward to speaking with Jax about this to see how the family is coping with the news. From what I understand, victims' families, they try not to get their hopes up.
Of course.
So I have a feeling she's going to tell us that, the family, although they were hoping to have something by that date of August 31st, I'm wondering how much hope they actually put in that. And I'm also curious if there have been any other advances in the case behind the scene that we don't know of.
I can't wait to talk to Jax. One of the things you mentioned earlier, though, that I wanted to follow up about is there was a key piece of evidence found almost immediately that could have saved the girls' lives.
Yes.
Do you remember what this key piece of evidence
Yes,
is?
So they found the insurance card of one of Phil's girlfriend at the time. And if the girls were in fact kept alive, if they had used that evidence immediately like they should have, it could have led them right to the girls, because those Polaroids showing the girls was the bedspread that was in Phil's trailer. Address on the card could have led them to the girls.
Immediately. And if the girls were kept alive, they could have found them alive. It's such an unfortunate oversight. And it does show you that there was some serious botches in this investigation. And I really look forward, as you said, to speaking with Jax and getting more of the insight, because, we did the overview, but she knows the case and she knows all of these people so well.
And, going back to that insurance card, in the beginning when the local police transferred it to the state police, that was the point where things were moving slow and they weren't searching the scene the way they should have. That card was the key piece of evidence. And I do believe that that piece of evidence was one of the most, if not the most important pieces of evidence in 2018 that led to the arrests of the 3 men.
I think so too. I wish they had investigated properly, because I think that while Danny and Kathy were killed immediately, I think these girls could have been recovered alive. And I think it's such a tragedy all around that they were not. And I mean, I also would like to know a lot more now about Lorene and the other people involved and where they stand given the apprehension
Yep.
of John Busick.
Ronnie Busick.
Sorry, given the apprehension of Ronnie Busick and going forward, what looks like it's going to happen now.
And we'll also keep an eye on this case since it's so new. The sentencing is so new. Well, I'm definitely interested to see if anything else comes out of this because the police do believe that now that there's this new interest in the case, the sentencing just happened, the book just came out. They suspect that, well, maybe not they, but I've heard that there's suspicion that there are several more people involved. It was not just those 3 men. Because remember that New Year's Eve party?
Yes.
That there's other people that were involved in the, in the sexual assault of these young girls.
It sounds like it. Well, thanks, Amy.
Yes.
Maybe we could turn it over to our interview now to Jax Miller.
Yes. Enjoy this interview with Jax Miller, author of Hell in the Heartland.
Women in Crime is written and hosted by Megan Sachs and Amy Schlossberg. Our producer and editor is James Varga. Our music is composed by Desert Media. If you enjoy the show, you can get access to ad-free episodes, exclusive AMAs, and other bonus content for a small monthly contribution through Patreon. To find out more, visit patreon.com/womenincrime.
Sources for today's episode includes Hell in the Heartland by Jax Miller, Unsolved Mysteries, Oxygen, and The Washington Post.